Today, we want to talk about reimagining news organization. So I know this conversation could be really tiring because we've been talking about reimagining news for a very, very long time. But yet, the way we imagine news is just more content, maybe a website. Now we have, newsletters, and some of us might even text. But is that all we can do for our audience? Maybe, maybe not. So what got me thinking about news organization recently is just really thinking about what is the supply and what the demand look like, right? And so my equation for success is really simple. Supply plus demand give you opportunities. And I've been thinking about this equation a lot because recently I've been thinking about what other business had transformed. So for anyone who's been flying, around the world, I'm really an obsessive airline loyalty person, right? I literally spend my whole life trying to rack up loyalty points so that I could, not board in group 5. And so when I think about the news that Delta Airlines last week announced that you no longer need to fly them to be the most loyal members, it got me really thinking about what is the business Delta Airline is in, and why is that relevant for journalism? So back then, when you fly airlines, the more you fly, you get the loyalty business. Loyalty is sort of a mythical thing that they sort of developed. It wasn't really even a business before, but now it's actually a multi-million-dollar business for many airlines, right? Because you could fly them to make money, you get their co-branded credit card to make money. And so last week when Delta Airlines announced that you no longer need to fly them they don't value sort of like the number of times that you fly them to earn the status, but instead is about how much money you spent. Well, guess what? You could earn their top tier status without even spending money to fly them, right? You could use the credit card, you could shop, you could, book restaurant reservations, right? And so what is the business of Delta Airlines? Is it just an airline, or is it now a credit card company that happened to operate an airline? Right? So fundamentally, they're thinking about their business differently. They're no longer just an airline that take you from point A to point B. They are a financial company that also happen to run an airline. And so it got me thinking about what other business that had made business transformation. Right? Amazon. When Amazon first started out, they just do books. Right? They send you books online, and then from there, it become this huge e-commerce platform. Right? They have Amazon Prime, you get your packages delivered to you. They also think about most of our work, where do we put our cloud-based computing? AWS, right? Which is a cloud business. So Amazon has successfully went from just an online book business to an e-commerce and a cloud computing business, right? When I think about legacy company, IBM, maybe most of you would not remember this machine, but maybe a few of us, some who does admit will remember this, right? IBM used to be a mainframe, right? They do hardware, right? And then from mainframe, they sort of developed these personal computers. But what is IBM now? Right? They are a software provider, right? They're cloud businesses. Right? So time and time again, we see different companies from airline to e-commerce, to tech company, and even consumer product, and make this business transformation away, right? Starbucks, coffee shop, right? There's one not that far away from here. And guess what? Now you could get Starbucks product in your supermarkets, right? You get these packaged goods, right? So they went from just a coffee shop to a packaged good company that you could get anywhere in the world beyond the Starbucks shop. So when you think about these businesses, they're constantly taking what they do best and they serving the customer in different ways. But what message are we conveying in this time of crisis globally when our journalism is being challenged, it's being polarized, right? And there's less and less investment in journalism. What is the message that we are telling the marketplace? Democracy dies in darkness. Now, I want to say that I do love democracy. I love it very much. That's why my parents ran away from China to the United States so that I have a chance to live in a free world. But does democracy bring food to my table? Does democracy guarantee us a job, right? So while I love democracy, I kind of think about what is more important, telling people how to find jobs, giving them information that's useful so that they could act on every single day, or democracy. Truth is more important than ever. Well, whose truth is more important than ever, right? As a person of color living in America, is my truth more important than the truth of the majority? That's debatable. So when we talk about truth, it comes with a lot of bias, right? Whose truth is it? And whose truth is more important? Because to the people on the right, they think their truth is more important than the truth on the left, and vice versa. So what is truth? Support local news. I support local news. I love local news. But why? Why do I need to subscribe? Why do I need to donate? Why should advertiser support local news? Does it tell you anything here? No, it just tells you that you should support local news. This one, journalism by journalists, not comedians. Well, does Trevor Noah not do a good job in telling the news of the day? Is he not communicating with his audience? What about Jon Stewart? What about John Oliver? What are they? Are they comedians? Are they quasi-journalists? Are they not just as effective as people who need to tell different kind of stories? So again, what message does journalism convey during this crisis compared to how other businesses think about it? Well, today I'm going to share with you a couple of lessons I learned in all these places I have worked for many, many years. So I sort of came from a very linear journalism business. I wanted to be a doctor because my parents are Asian, and in America, like if you're Asian immigrant, you either be a doctor, a lawyer, or accountant. And I realized that I don't want to be a doctor, so I choose something equally sick. So I did journalism. And so I started out at the Wall Street Journal as a graphics person before data was a thing. And then I moved to Miami Herald in Miami to focus on local news. That bring me to AP, NBC, Knight Foundation, and Center for Public Integrity, which is a small nonprofit in the US that do investigate journalism. And I also served in the past as the president for the Asian American Journalists Association, which is similar to the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. And they have many chapters, so if you're not a member, please join. So these are the lessons learned from working in all these places in terms of how we could tangibly rethink and transform our business. So what are the key questions that we have to ask every single day, which I think a lot of journalists are not very good at answering? What is the value of journalism to the average person? Not to the college elite, not to people who love news, but to the average person. And think about the messages in the US, how we convey, right? Democracy, truth. How does that relate to the average person? How is that helpful to the average person? And if you can't answer why your journalism matters to the average person, you have to ask yourself, what is it that you're doing? Second question, is your journalism a necessity? Is it a necessity or is it a luxury? Right? Because all of us get into the business because we think we're serving the public good. But how do we know we're really serving the public good? Is what we do so essential that it's a necessity? Is it both urgent and essential? Right? So those are the questions I ask myself every single day, because people who are investing in us need to know what is that return of investment. And if we can't answer these questions well, then we are basically squandering the money away. So here's my lesson learned. Prioritizing learning, continuous alignment of your vision, mission, and strategy, product, not stories. Tear down different kind of silos. And guess what? Technology is everyone's job, not just a developer, but everyone's jobs. So when I think about prioritized learning, this is an example that I use is, at the Knight Foundation, 3 years ago, I was thinking about, hey, what is this thing called AI? And that's before generative AI become sort of so big this year. And I was thinking about this thing, I think is going to affect journalism in a really major way. So I start thinking about how we invest in AI before the buzz. And so you could see that I start writing about it since 2018, right? And then continue the work in 2019. And then while I was at Knight, I made a substantial investment in 2021. And in fact, in one of the early days, Chequiato here, we made an investment because they were using AI to do fact checking. And I'm just like, hey, that is really interesting, right? And then John Keefe, who you're going to meet later, he runs an AI studio for Quartzstan. And I'm just like, hey, that is really interesting, but they are the outlier. So when I think about prioritizing learning, you have to think about follow what smart people are doing. What are they doing that's so different that no one is talking about? This is Amy Webb. How many of you know who Amy is? If you don't, you should follow her. She really talk about trends, and one of her big proponents is scenario planning, right? And so one of the way that I try to learn, and if I were you, I go back to your news organization and think about how you could learn by scenario planning. And so when I was thinking about investing in AI, I sort of think about what are the different scenarios that I should be thinking about. So the first thing I did is I looked for signals and patterns. And so what I did is I worked with John to do a research and say, could you actually research how many media company is actually doing AI back then? And when I say back then, it's around 2019, right? And so he basically, talked to more than 131 organizations, right, that are thinking about AI and how they're thinking about it, right? And because back then when I was at the AP, we were doing automation of content. So I want to validate my assumption. Are we just using AI to produce more content? So it turned out that that is not always the case. A lot of people are thinking about AI in terms of how they augment capacity, how they reduce variable costs, right? How do they use it for engagement? And in terms of news reporting is low. So we want to look for these signals and patterns constantly. And then in these signals and patterns, I look at, well, who are the ones who are doing AI back then, right? Out of 129 projects, which I was really shocked to find that there was that many projects across the globe that is focusing in AI back in 2019. But what tells me that across the globe, the big players like the New York Times, right, BBC and The Guardian, they could afford to do AI. But what about local? 6% out of 129 projects. So that is a signal to me that there's a problem here, right? If local news is truly the backbone of societal democracy, local news is behind, very behind. And so when I think about how do I make a smart investment in doing local news, I think about Amy, I think about John, I think about the work that Laura does in Chequiato, and I start thinking about these grids, right? So a really good scenario planning is you want to create tension. So what I did is I used these two grids behind me. The first one, if anyone know Donald Rumsfeld, he's once the defense secretary for the United States, and he has this grid called known unknown, right? So I basically then run the research that John did into this grid. What are the facts? What are the deviations? Right? What are the challenges and experiments that we need to know? And what are the emerging knowledge gap? Having a really good 2x2 framework help you make decisions a lot quicker. And this is something that I do constantly, day in and day out, as I think about how I reimagine what journalism can be. Because if you can't imagine the worst and the most innovative or the best scenario, then you're always sort of making changes in that incremental phase, right? You're going to go from like, oh, maybe I would do something. Oh, my next idea is going from website to mobile app. Right? That is not like that innovative, right? If someone's saying that, like, you know what, we don't need websites anymore, and here's what we're going to do. Like, to me, that is more interesting. So part of the scenario planning is actually pushing you to make decisions, pushing you to imagine in ways that you haven't before. Just like all those businesses, right? Like, imagine the conversation that IBM has saying that We're no longer a computer company. We're just going to be cloud business. What does that look like? So when I think about the 2x2 plan, it makes you think about these issues. So why do we need to prioritize learning? Because it helps your mind grow. Right? For journalism, I feel like we learn a lot about the people that we cover, but we rarely take the time to learn about the business and really reimagine what our business can be beyond producing news. Right? It also enables organizations to respond to unforeseen challenges. Think about how many times we caught flat-footed with technology. We really missed the boat in Web 1, which is websites, right, blogs, and we definitely missed the boat in Web 2, which is social media. And guess, now like social media company are the one that's dominating news, right? By doing scenario planning, you also sort of foresee what are some of the risks that you have. So for example, in AI, like, have you done a scenario planning, what AI mean for your newsroom, right? What are the risks of AI versus the opportunity for AI? And then based on where you are now, how do you actually mitigate the risk so that it could become an opportunity, right? So learning is super important. Second thing we want to do is sort of align your mission, your vision, mission, and strategy constantly. And this is a constant conversation, right? How many of you actually talk about your vision and your mission in your newsroom? And does it evolve? I remember when I went to, when I started applying for a job, I was looking at someone's mission, and they say, oh, our mission is to connect Washingtonians together. And I'm saying, we don't need a mission to connect other Washingtonians together. Because there's Yelp, right? There's Facebook, there's Tinder if you're dating. So what is the media company, right? So you always have to think about how is the mission and vision relevant to the particular company. And so the way I think about that is doing a SWOT analysis. Again, prioritize learning, right? You want to think about SWOT. You want to interview everybody in your company and ask them the same questions. And from the question, you want to think about what the SWOT look like. And then based on that, you want to think about what is the strength. Your strength could probably be your mission, right? Your weaknesses is something that you need to tackle. The opportunity is what could bring you sustainability. The threat is really for your awareness to say, what is it that could undermine your fundamental business? And then from there, you want to do a series of how do we focus, how do we imagine, right? Apply design thinking. And then at the end, this is basically the statement that we have, right? What we do is we investigate and expose systems and powerful interests that contribute to inequality and how we do it, right? Because back then when I first came to CPI, all we did was the first bullet, pursue national investigation that equipped the public to drive change. From the conversation, I realized there's a bigger opportunity, which is in bullet 2 and 3. How do we strengthen the capacity of local news organizations, especially in underserved and underrepresented communities? And third, because most of us are now journalists of color, how do we lead a conversation that journalism could be much, much more inclusive? And so those are sort of two very tactical things that you could do, right? So think about what your SWOT analysis is for your mission, and then think about how you can prioritize learning. I have much more, but I'm also running out of time. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.